Welcome to Life Biz and All That Jazz, the podcast where real talk meets transformation. If you're navigating your mental health, healing from trauma, or just trying to create a life that truly feels like yours, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Jasmine Lisciotto, and each week we uncover the raw, unfiltered, unmasking conversations about mental health, sobriety, trauma, and shifting pain to purpose. If you're new here, welcome to the family. If you've come back for more, thank you for trusting my vision and coming back for more. I really appreciate it. Today's podcast includes conversations that are sensitive or emotionally triggering, so please listen with care and take breaks when you need. Have a look at the show notes for more details on specific topics, and just remember to always put your mental health and well-being first. Today's guest is someone who shows us what it really takes to walk away from a long, toxic relationship and begin the work of starting again, and also using that pain to create a life and help others. Our guest today is Kyle Miller. He's a trauma-informed coach who helps people rebuild their life after abuse, reclaim their truth, and stop the cycle of self-blame. After surviving a 14-year abusive relationship, Kyle didn't just do the work to recover. He did the work to survive and truly thrive. Today we talk about the psychological effects of a long-term abusive relationship, how to spot the illusions and things that we may miss and not realize that are actually toxic in a relationship. And one of my favorite things, being kind to yourself. We really unpack this and how important it is for growth. So that's enough from me. Let's bring in Kyle. Kyle Miller, welcome to Life Biz and All That Jazz.
Thank you so much for having me on. Really excited.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kyle. I'm really excited to learn more from you today, and to the person listening to be able to hear your story and to see where you are right now, what you're doing, and how you might be able to help them. So like we were just having a chat earlier, I think it's really important that we all know that there's someone out there that can relate to them. There's always someone out there that can help them. No one is ever alone. And that's always been the biggest purpose for Life Biz and All That Jazz, is that to show that there's always someone that will listen. So before we get started into the deeper conversations today, what do you think are some key takeaways that the audience can learn from our conversation today that we're going to be talking about?
I think, and it's funny you talk about being alone. My mission really for my business is for no one to ever feel alone or hopeless. And so I think one of the biggest things that I focus on a lot is a lot of the work that we do in healing and mental health, and all of it is about allowing. And so we can't force ourselves, we can't beat ourselves into healing or working through any of the emotions or any of those things. It's all a process of allowing. And it's the same thing with learning to love ourselves. That's all a process of allowing as well. And I think that's one of the biggest things that that is a big part of what I do, is getting people to the point where they can allow all of those things to happen, because we're trying to push and force and so many of the phrases and what goes on in society, you just got to push through. And I think that allowing is a big takeaway of all of that. And I think that finding other people to help you through, the more that you open up to the world and to yourself, the more that the world opens up to you. And that's a big part of moving through all of this, allowing yourself back into yourself, and then allowing the people into your life. And it's really hard for a lot of people, especially if they've gone through trauma or abuse. It's very hard for us to trust anyone. And I think that trust is earned, and that is that's a big part of everything. But the good people don't care if they have to earn the trust. They're very comfortable with doing, being there for you and doing whatever needs to be done in order to earn the trust and in reciprocation. So yeah. and I think, the other thing that I could add to it is that so much of all of our stories are all the same. And even though the details are different, a lot of the stories are all the same. A lot of us have gone through the same things. Our minds work in a large part in the very same way, even though they look a little bit different from the outside. We think a little bit different, but in general, most all of it is the same. And so whatever you've gone through, someone else has probably gone through something very similar, and what helped them work through it very well may, at least a part of it, help you to work through it as well.
That was perfect. I think what a lot of key points that you touched on then are really common for, like you said, a lot of healing and people that go through trauma. It's trust is something we need to live with. I think we need to have trust in life, but when you go through something and you lose that, it's hard to build that up. And another thing that I'm excited to unpack a little bit more later is you mentioned about allowing yourself to do it and not forcing, because when you step back and you allow yourself to do it, or you give yourself permission in a way to kind of like step forward. So what I'd like to talk about now, I'd like to take it back. So take it back as far as you want, and let's talk about what life was like for you before you got to today. So you can go as deep as you want to go, explain as much as you want to explain.
Well, I almost 20 years ago, I started a journey of studying personal development, and so back then I was a truck driver, and so I had lots of time on the road. And I don't know exactly how many hours, but I'm going to guess somewhere north of 30,000 hours of audiobooks and podcasts that I have
Wow, yeah.
listened to over the time, and then added books in and YouTube and just the different courses and everything else. A lot of time and money on education over the years. Through the course of that time, I was in an abusive relationship for 14 years. And that broke probably every part of me. And it was even harder when I was getting out. I had all of this background and understanding, which I realized I was spoiled in a lot of
Mm,
ways, because so much background and understanding in personal development, didn't know anything about narcissism or emotionally abusive relationships or people, any of those things. They were just not a part of what I had really learned about. And so at that point I didn't know exactly what to do, but I knew what to do, which is go back in and learn and study. And so I did a lot of that and learning about, first learning about narcissism and emotional abuse and all of the different manipulation and all of the terms, the hot button terms that we hear, and got into therapy and then got into coaching as well, and so a lot of work on myself. But one of the biggest things, and I think this is probably the big key for what I do now as a coach, is I had to basically coach myself through how to present what I was struggling with to the coaches and to the therapists, because it didn't I couldn't just show up as me and just spew everything out on the table and have them help me sift through and work through it. I really had to formulate how I was going to present it to them in order to get their help through all of that. And I think that helped me a lot, because it was so hard to really get help and support, even when I asked for it, even from the professionals that I seeked for support. And so that helped me tremendously in understanding what it takes in order to go through the healing process. um, and then, yeah, and then after, it's, I kind of laugh, it's funny but not funny, but I think that usually in those relationships, that's the tip of the iceberg. We find out that we are in an abusive relationship or situation, whatever it is, And then we learn about all of the other things that we have unhealed wounds or old traumas or anything else. We work through the trauma of that relationship, and then the real work begins, and we start actually working through all of the things in our life that brought us to that abusive relationship or trauma, whatever we went through.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what's really important is the way that you talk about your story. Not, I wouldn't say proud. You're probably proud of your journey of how far you've come. But I think, the way that you talk about your story is just, it's so interesting because it's like that you're talking about it as it's the past. Well, it is the past.
Mm.
It's like a part of your life that you went through. But then, yeah, I just thought it was quite fascinating. It's like that was the version of you. And now you're able to take that and really give back and be a coach.
Mhm.
So you started your personal development 20 years ago. And then within that 20 years, you had that relationship.
Mm.
Were you in the relationship before you started the personal development?
No,
No.
ironically, when I got into that relationship, I equated a lot of finding, my person, my soulmate, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
It was like, oh, if I hadn't have done this work on myself to become who I was then, because it was probably, I don't know, it was months after, 6 months or however long after that I ended up in that relationship. And I thought, gosh, if I hadn't have done all of this work to myself, then I wouldn't have been able to get into this relationship.
What I hear, and something similar that also happened to myself, is that when we start that journey, we open something up
Hmm.
and we become vulnerable.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's like that maybe at that exact point that you started, that was the doorway in.
Yeah.
And yeah, because a similar thing to me. And then while I was going through a relationship and, uncovering all these patterns and about myself, then it's also, I was questioning and I thought, well, I've done the work. And in my early 20s, I had a relationship where I was cheated on. And it was quite hard because we lived together. We were talking about the future. Like, they had met my family. Like, it was really, really hard. And I just graduated uni. So I was probably about 25-ish. And I thought, why me? And then I went and had therapy because I thought it was my fault. I had this pattern. I also saw that in a way of I became a fixer in relationships. And I also felt the guilt of not being able to help my dad. So I thought, I can fix them. I can help this man. So similar things like that happened at my start of my relationships. But then I did the therapy, I did the work, and I was like, I know what not to look for. I don't need someone that's fixed. I need someone that's healed. Then I did the work, and then similar thing happened again. But it's hard because you put all that pressure on yourself. And I really related to when you said, like, I want to find my person. Like, I've got so much to offer now and I'm doing all these things. Like, I know myself, but really, I guess that would have just been the start of your journey. And I'm talking now, like, probably about, my dad, I lost my dad at 28. So, that was still an age for me where I was still learning myself. And like through my 20s, I find it, and people think we're supposed to have it all figured out by then. I'm in my 30s now, but it's more that I started that development a few years after, thinking, okay, something needs to change here. And then you still do all the work. But then now I'm just single and I'm like, I don't know if I could let anyone in. It's like having that block now. I know exactly what I want, but the clock's also against my time when it comes to kids. But I don't want to just settle. And
Uh-huh.
that's something I really promote is I'm not just going to get in a relationship. And that's why I left my last relationship. It wasn't easy. It was another serious relationship talking about the future and children and marriage and all that stuff. But I knew there was something there that I didn't want for the rest of my life. And it wasn't making me the best person. And I lost myself in that again, even after doing all the years at work. And then it wasn't till deciding, okay, I think I need to remove alcohol out because alcohol makes me judge a lot of my decisions. I still ticked all the boxes and I was more like a weekend dopamine drinker. And then now it comes back to the ADHD, undiagnosed ADHD. And that's a whole nother thing, a whole nother topic. But what I'm trying to get to is I think when we do the work and start with the personal development, it gets harder before it gets easier.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your point of view on that. It's going to get uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to be very transparent when I talk about healing and uncovering deep conditioning and beliefs and creating beliefs that we want to have that actually align with us, not ones that we were taught to believe or passed on from our parents or other family members or friends. The hard part is, I think, where a lot of people stop. And this is obviously related to healing, overall. But then I think as well is when it comes back to relationships is it's often easier not to leave. I'd love for you to just touch on how it can be harder at the start, but then it does get better. But yeah, on your experience.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't actually get harder. I think it's just as hard. But I think everything feels way worse in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's because we are gaining new awareness. I think we are just finally aware of how bad everything was or how not good things were. I don't think that it actually is any worse or gets any worse as we start on the healing journey. I think we just become more aware of everything that was going on, in ourselves, in the relationship, with the healing, with finding, uncovering wounds. I think it's all the awareness that we then realize, it's like, and I think about maybe if you have like a razor blade and you have cut yourself and you didn't feel the cut. So it's like I didn't notice that I got cut. And then you look down and realize, oh, this is really bad. And I think that's a lot of what the beginning of healing is not really noticing that you had all of the wounds. And especially for most people, it's normal. It's normal to go through life the way that we have gone through. And whether or not you've had, major traumas or little traumas or anything, I mean, we all have to some extent. But all of that is normal. And living with all of that is normal. And so then when we start working on ourselves, then we start to gain awareness of ourselves, of things going on in our life, of our emotions, and all of it seems so much worse in the beginning. And yes, it gets better and then it gets worse again. And I think that's also with awareness, because we discover the things that are causing trouble or things we haven't worked through, and we start working through those things, and then we get feeling better. And it's like, wow, this is incredible. And then we gain a new level of awareness of other things that we just did not see before. And so then it feels like we've gone backwards and everything has gotten worse. And oh my gosh, I don't know how to handle this anymore. And I think it's just continually new levels of awareness. And that's what actually feels like it's causing the havoc in our life. Whereas I don't think that's actually accurate. I think it is just simply the awareness of what's actually going on in us.
That's a great way to put it, because life's still the same as it was. Like you said, it's just that we can see it from a zoomed out perspective instead of, kind of just being in there coasting it.
Yep.
With narcissists, the term sometimes I hear gets thrown around a lot, and even online, and I don't like it to ever bash anyone's like sharing or trying to do their content and all that stuff, but I sometimes find it's used for like an scapegoat in a way. Some people can do it, like where you've got the real people like yourself that can see that is. I've had friends that have gone through really hard breakups and stuff, and they've done the work and come out the other side. Like I said, it's a term that I sometimes hear used in the wrong ways, or it can be put in a way that when someone does actually come and need help or think that they're in that, it can like maybe dull a little bit on their experiences. What would you say to that with someone that maybe thinks, oh, this person I'm with is showing certain traits,
Mhm.
but then they go to tell someone and be like, oh, everyone says, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What would you say to them? Because
So
that's what's hard.
yeah, yeah, and it is really hard. It's another one of those terms that's thrown around. Everybody wants to use it, and this person's being narcissistic, and this, and um, and there's truth in it sometimes. And I think what I would say is I'm going to step back a little bit, because if you look at codependency, if you look at CPTSD, if you look at insecure attachment styles, ADHD, OCD. There's so many different diagnoses that when you step back and look at the different tendencies in those different diagnosis or tendencies, however you want to look at them, a lot of those all across the board have things that look like from the outside narcissistic traits,
Mm.
and they would be pointed out as narcissistic traits. And I can say, for one thing, love bombing. Love bombing is something that, for instance, anxious people, if they're insecure, attached, anxious, or if they're codependent, that is something that they will do. Fearful avoidance will do the same thing. They will
Wow.
love bomb people, and it comes from a very different place, because they are striving for the connection, and oh my gosh, this is an incredible person, I really want them. And so it looks like love bombing, and it is love bombing, but it is not to suck that person in so that they can take control of them. And so it comes from a very different place. And so where I look at the differentiation between possibly, and I can't diagnose, so I'm not, I'm not a licensed therapist or anything, being able to diagnose narcissist or not, and certainly not NPD. But the line of differentiation that I look at is, okay, do they have, however many of the narcissistic traits, and however you want to look at that. But then also, do they have a lack of empathy, a lack of compassion, and a lack of accountability? And
Mm.
then at that point, with those three things, the lack of empathy, compassion, and accountability, on top of having, different narcissistic traits, the abuse and manipulation, gaslighting, all of the different hot button terms, which are also overused. But if they have all of that in combination, then I'm leaning towards maybe this person might be narcissistic. And so that's really how I look at it. But the most important thing that I would say is, it doesn't matter. We want to know if they're a narcissist or not, because if they're a narcissist, then we need to get out of the relationship. And if they're not, then hopefully maybe we can help them work through and heal and improve the relationship and all of those things. And the real reality is that most people are, I don't want to say they're completely as resistant to change as narcissists are, but most people don't want to change. And
Mm.
so if it is an unhealthy or toxic relationship, then that's all that actually matters. And if they're not doing things to work through the issues, to get help, support, whatever that looks like for anyone, if they're not doing those things, then this is not a healthy relationship. And then we have to decide how long we want to actually stay in that relationship.
So many different areas that relate to narcissists, like you said. There's so many different disorders, and I know with ADHD, there's a thing where if someone's talking about something, you want to relate to it.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that my one of my best friends has that. And when we chat, like, she'll be talking about something and I'll be like, oh, this. And that can sometimes be seen as selfish.
Mhm.
like, and just cares about their own self. So that's just obviously like one term. And I think another one with the like CPSD as well is it's quite common. And a lot of people that they've been through trauma and they haven't really dealt with it, or they don't really know and they've blocked it down, is like you said, they're just having these like relationship styles or who they are, and the love bombing. They might see someone online share, oh, if their person is these 5 things, that means they're a narcissist. Well, they could be, but then they could also have the empathy, but then it's just you're not seeing that because the relationship's at a level of toxicity where
Mhm.
either person doesn't have the capability to show empathy because they're so deep into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lack of empathy also, can
Mm.
be somebody that's emotionally immature. And, boy, there's a lot of that out there. And
Yes.
so that, that in and itself could look like a lack of empathy, because really emotional immaturity, if you look at that, it's like, okay, well, they're acting like a 12-year-old. I mean, I know they're an adult and they're, they're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, but they're acting like a 12-year-old or an 8-year
Mm.
old or however old. And so of course they don't have any empathy. And but it does not necessarily mean that they're being narcissistic. So
No.
all of it's very, very complicated and nuanced, except for the simple fact that if they're making progress, then we have something we can work with. And
Mm.
not, and we continually have the same issues over and over again, and we can't work through them, and they don't really want to, then that's not healthy.
Let's talk about making progress. So, if you're in this relationship right now and you know that there's a lot of things that are coming up, how would you approach it to work on? What would you suggest where they could have a conversation? Because you can't come to someone and say, like, darling, I think you're a nasty, you can't sit down. You're not going to sit at the table and have an intervention
Huh.
and put things out there. And you definitely don't want to say that, you've been doing like looking into things and I think you've got this and this, because
Yeah.
that could it could ruin the relationship altogether if they aren't as well.
Mhm.
Like, it could really be like, I can't believe you feel that about me, or the opposite. It could make things worse, if they really are, because they're going to just deflect.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? To kind of open that conversation to see if they want to do the work.
I think that going about it at, one thing at a time, and not at all ever. I do not recommend. I mean, everyone can do whatever they choose, but I do not
Yes.
recommend ever calling someone out as a narcissist. That is
No.
just not it. It's pretty much always going to end badly, and and it definitely could be dangerous. Both mentally, physically, emotionally, all of it. But I think talking about one specific thing that's going on in the relationship, and if you come at it as, you're doing this thing and I need you to stop doing this thing, no one is going to show up well to that. We don't respond well to, hey, by the way, you're messing all this up and I can't believe you're doing this. And a lot of people, because I think what happens is we wait, and all of this pressure builds in this.
Mm.
We continue to have this issue, and we're having this issue, and we haven't dealt with this issue, and we haven't said anything about it, and we're super frustrated. And then all of a sudden well, you're doing this thing. And so then it turns into this big fight. And I think the way to actually approach that is, I would really love to have a conversation that I don't want to have with you, and and I just want you to listen, if you will please do that. And I'm feeling like we're fighting about this thing, whatever the situation, whatever the problem is, we're fighting about this, and I continue to have my feelings hurt about it, and I'm sure that you're probably having your feelings hurt as well. And I really just want to work through this issue. You're not the problem. I know that each of us contribute to all of this, but you're not the problem, and that's not why I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you so that we can fix or work through the issues that we're having, and this issue in particular in the relationship, and just open that conversation up in that way, rather, because anytime we blame, shame, judge someone else, they're going to shut down, or they're going to retaliate, they're going to deflect it. Even the healthiest of people, we don't want to own our stuff. I don't want to
Mm.
own my stuff. I'm a coach. I do this all the time. I work on myself all the time. I don't want to own anything. It sucks always. It's terrible. Oh, I did that wrong. Okay. And then all of the shame, and it that's the way that most people are. And so just being very, very open about it, and then perhaps also saying, we're I want to talk about this, but let's kind of put a safeguard in here. If we need time out, we can take time out, and that's no big deal, and we can come back to it. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to fight about it. I
Mm.
want to have an open, honest conversation about it, and see if we can figure out how to work through this, or find someone that can help support us in working through this, rather than us fighting about it, because we've been fighting about it and it has not been helping. And so let's go about this a different way.
You touched on a lot of great tips there for someone to open up the conversation. And I think it's coming in with compassion, knowing that they're probably not realizing it. If it is a situation, most of the times, if it's toxic and there's a lot of stuff going around, people will bring up things, maybe little things, little steps along the way, and then you're probably noticing a compiling of things not being done and not being heard.
Mhm.
Because I think once you just don't feel heard, you really just come into this person and you just lose everything that you have of yourself. And then I guess then that's when it can make it a bit harder. And you mentioned about seeking help. Obviously, there's relationship coaches that specialize in certain areas, but we're going to really focus on what you do today. And would you, in a way, if someone come to you and they weren't sure, like how does it work? How does your coaching work when it comes to the first kind of steps? Do you help them go through it? Do you help them identify if they're in the relationships? I'd love to know more.
Yeah. So primarily who I work with is people that have been through narcissistic abuse, and they're no longer in the relationship. I also will work with people if they're in a relationship. I've had people come to me that suspect maybe their partner is a narcissist. And I certainly have had other people come to me that are in actively a relationship with, they're pretty certain, a narcissist, or some that have actually been diagnosed. So kind of a broad range there. But really, when they come to me, the biggest thing for me is to understand where they are, and in their understanding, and where they are in the relationship. And I don't I don't have a cookie cutter. I know it's probably better for marketing and social media and all of those things. But the way that I coach is very personal. It's very intuitive,
Yes, that's good.
and so it's very much tailored to every single individual that I work with. And I basically, see where they're at. And depending, a lot of people will come to me and they are very focused on, um, they did this and they did that and this was awful, and all of their focus is essentially on the narcissist and what they did and the abuse and all of those things. And with those people, the biggest thing that I start with is for them to feel seen and heard and acknowledged. And we can get to all of the other aspects after that. but for them to really feel seen and heard for what they experienced. And then I start bringing them back into themselves, because a lot of the abusive relationships, we we are focused on everything outside of the relationship, everything outside of ourselves. And so all of these things are happening, this happening, they did this, I can't do this. And so there's no focus on self. And so after we kind of go through that, the abuse, whatever happened, and then it's like, okay, how do you feel today? And that's a very strange, uncomfortable question for most people. How do you actually feel? Oh, well, I had a good day, I did this, I did that. That's not the answer. you know because they're still focused on the outside. I did this thing today, and so I feel good. Or
Mm.
this happened and I don't feel good, which is not how do you actually feel. And and so it's a lot of it is kind of training and reprogramming to focus on ourselves, which is a strange and novel concept, which most of us were never taught. So
Yes.
yeah, that's kind of, in a nutshell. And then we start working through all of the stuff in themselves, and their awareness, because awareness is probably the most important thing with all of the healing work and everything else in our lives, because we cannot change anything we are not aware of.
Awareness is fun. It's not fun. It's hard to do. Like, obviously, someone listening right now might be thinking, where do I start? What do I do? But I just want to say that when you do start to uncover certain parts of yourself, like at first, it's that realization and understanding, who am I without a relationship? Who am I without views I've been brought up with? And then you also go on this journey where you're able to really like remove any masks or any expectations other people have had of you, and actually live in alignment.
Uh-huh.
And I often laugh now, because you can laugh about it. I think when we get to a certain point, like, more, I'm a forever learning, forever healing. I believe that healing is not a destination, but it's a journey. But I think we get to a point where we can be our best selves and we feel like we are healed and from certain pain and trauma. But then it's really still knowing that, we're still going to grow and continue to grow. And the awareness part, I think I'm saying in a positive term, is always been the funnest part of my journey of uncovering things. And that's what I want to share, that once you do get through those steps of the uncomfortable and digging deep and finding who you are again and how you really feel, like, how does your nervous system feel today? What are you doing for yourself, that, uncovering and that understanding? And then it kind of gets to a point where you want to keep going. Once you uncover a little bit, it gets, in a way, I think, addictive, and you'll be so self-aware that things will happen to you. And something you said before about yourself, if you do something and you think, oh, like, you don't want to be pulled up on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that too. I love being triggered by something.
Mm.
And if it's something that I would react to differently in the past.
Yeah.
And it's just an example I was doing the other day. I was doing a podcast and I just sat down 5 minutes in and I knocked over my full matcha drink, like coffee drink, and it went everywhere. And usually I would be worrying about that and thinking, oh, the floor, like this, that. And I didn't let it affect me. I'd continued talking and cleaned it up after. I knew, like, it can be fixed. And sometimes it's as simple as knowing that you just need to know that everything can be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And if it can't be fixed fully, like, we can put it together, like fine china, or like those pots that they make. I can't remember what country is it, where they put art back together and they sell it for thousands of dollars. So I'm going off on a bit of tangent here. I do that. So let's come back to not having cookie cutter coaching. I think it's perfect. I know you mentioned about the marketing. Someone that's in marketing, like I've actually always promoted my marketing and the way that I do it as like, and social media and stuff like that is I've never had a cookie cutter services. Like I do have the base services, but everyone's different. And this is obviously relating to business, but every person is different. And if you come in and say, okay, well, this is the checklist that I go through, tick, 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 you're not able to offer someone something that's
Yeah.
going to really benefit them because everyone's got a different journey. And there's certain things that you'll use that can relate to everybody and, you can tailor. But no, I think that's really good that you don't do it like that. And I'm finding more and more people these days are offering that. And I know it can be harder for yourself. I take my hat off to think it can be harder for you as from a business perspective. You do what you do because you love it and you want to help people, but you're putting in extra work.
3 steps to work through, 5 steps to work through.
Yeah.
All of the things which are great for marketing.
Yeah.
And I struggle with, one of my clients told me, she said, "You're like a magician. I don't understand how," and I'm like, that seems pretty bold for me to put in my marketing. I'm like the magician that's going to help you work through all the healing process.
Yeah.
But they're going, I don't get that. This guy says he's got 5 steps for me to go through it. And so I'm going to trust him because magician sounds a little spooky woo woo maybe.
Maybe put pocket magician in front of that. Oh, pocket genie. Look at us talking.
Yeah.
Giving you marketing tips. I've been doing that a lot lately, actually. It's quite fun because I think overall I'm blessed in a way that I now get to use my business and my skills, which is separate. I also get to use that in a way that I get to do the podcast. I'm editing. I'm able to offer. And I think that's something as well that we often forget is when we do healing or look into personal development is that there's so many options we have to do it, but also with ourselves. If we all have a story, and I think that's something that I really like to get across is you might be thinking right now that you're alone, but you're not alone. There's someone out there that has been through what you've been through. Yeah, they might not be in your direct circle. They might not be someone that you know right now, but just keep going and moving forward and you will find that.
Most people don't talk about it. So it's one of those things that, with even just talking a little bit about what we've been through, my bet is there's a whole lot of other people that are right there sitting next to you that have been through something similar and they just didn't say anything about it. That the other thing I wanted to touch on just a little bit. You said, that you're on a continuous, healing growth journey. And I think there is a point, and I think it's different for everyone, and the way that you look at it is different probably. But where you go from, you really transform from healing into growth. And it doesn't mean that there's not healing phases through your growth, but we get to a baseline, I think, at a certain point when we've done enough of the healing work that we get to move into the growth phase.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. And I think that's it's always further down the line, it seems like, than what we would like, but it's not as far away as what it seems like it would be in the very beginning anyway.
It's just taking that first step. I love what you said then about the healing and the growth. And I feel like you're doing some coaching on me now. I'm getting like a bonus here. It took me a while. And now, because I think when I decided to stop drinking alcohol, that's when I was like, okay, well, all this other stuff is coming up. And I fully dealt with like losing my dad properly, because before I used to just numb. And like I was saying, it's so easy to just have a wine when you're feeling down or stressed. And this is very similar in relationships too. People in relationships, if you had a fight, you grab the bottle, but then the bottle isn't fixing anything. It's probably just going to escalate things. And then you're probably going to say things once you've had a few wines that you're going to regret. it just really starts that whole cycle again. But going back on the healing is, I always used to think it was harder to break free, like step from, okay, I'm healed, healed in these certain things, but then what's next? It's like,
Mhm.
it's easy to get into a mode where you think, oh, well, I've got to work on something else, but you don't. You can you get to a point, like you said, where it's like, okay, well, I've worked on all this. This is who I am now. This is my identity.
Mm.
These are my beliefs. This is my values. This is everything. And that's all that work, writing it all out and uncovering, and future letters to yourself. And I do a lot of stuff like that, or have in the past. And then you kind of think, okay, well, now I've built the foundation. It's like the extra part of that. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, is it's that you get to a point and then it's just building all around.
Yeah, and I think that if we're not careful, we can get into that realm of I need to fix me still. I still need to work.
Mm,
And in a lot of ways, we are then avoiding our life or avoiding the growth phase because we're staying stuck
yes.
in the healing phase. And I, and it's different for every single person. And that's where it's really where the awareness comes in, because we don't realize, of course, with any of these phases, we don't realize where we're at until we become aware of what's actually going on. And and nothing has gone wrong with that. That's one of the biggest things. We're going to beat ourselves up then again for whatever it is the next time, and realize that nothing has gone wrong. You just didn't have the awareness of where you were yet.
Yes, you'll get there. You'll get there slowly,
Uh-huh.
day by day, but it all starts with one step. I'd love to touch on viewing the relationship from an outside perspective. So this is for people that maybe have a friend or family member that they think are in a narcissistic relationship. Often people will notice around them before, and you can't really go to someone and tell them. You can maybe have certain conversations, but you really do need to be careful what you say, I think, because it can ruin your relationship with your friend or your family member. What would you say to someone listening that is concerned and wants to kind of reach out or doesn't know what to do?
I
Do
think,
you
yeah,
work with stuff like that? Yeah.
yeah, I think this is one of the hardest things for us because, especially if we see what's actually going on in the relationship, it's hard to not say, hey, this is really not okay.
Mm,
I think there's sometimes a time and a place when you can do that, but I think more often that ends up driving them away or shutting them up, I guess. And not that we intend to do that, but they're going, "Ooh, this is painful." Anytime I say anything about what's going on in my relationship, then they say, "Well, that's not right. And that shouldn't happen, and you should tell them," and whatever. All of the things that we say to those people, and so then they go, "Ooh, it's painful when I talk to them, so I'm just not going to talk to them about whatever it is that's happening." And so I think one of the best ways that we can step around that, I guess, is to just ask and listen about what's going on in the relationship, and then say, okay, so how do you feel about this? What do you think is going on?
mm,
Is there is there anything that you've done to try to change this? Lots of curiosity and less judgment, because they ultimately have to come to the decision for themselves. And so if we can help them to come to that decision for themselves, that, oh my gosh, I'm in an abusive relationship, or this is happening, or whatever it is, if we can help them come to that realization, awareness, decision themselves, that's the best way. Because in a lot of cases, if we just say that's wrong and they shouldn't do that, all of the things that we want to say, that's probably
mm.
natural for us to say, a lot of times they'll go, ooh, well, I'm not going to say anything about this anymore because I can't, because then I feel terrible, and and then, they're going to hate my partner, they're going to hate what's going on, and then I won't be able to hang out with them, or any of those things, because it becomes very complicated. Oh gosh, they think that my partner is a toxic person and they don't want to be around them, because they're doing all of these things. And so, yeah, asking questions, being curious, no judgment as much as you can, and then just being there for them. And I know
Mm,
it's miserably hard. It's miserably hard to watch somebody go through the struggles and go, okay, there's not really anything I can do. But the reality is, there is really not much of anything that any of us can do. That's why it's so hard with, domestic violence and all of that. When the police show up, they show up and try to handle whatever situation has gone on. And and a lot of times there just isn't anything that they can actually do until the person is ready to actually leave the relationship.
you explained that very well. I think, and that's the hardest part, is seeing someone you care about go through something like that, or they might not even notice. They might not understand see anything that's happening, and it's just like different patterns that you can see from an outsider's perspective. Do you think with narcissists is it's like embedded in someone? Do you think they're born with it, or is it like it's not a gene in as such, but do you think that anyone could ever they can change? Do you think there's possibilities? Because I've always heard no, and I'd love your perspective on that, because I think this answer in the question as well can help someone to think that how much work have I got to put in? How many years? What else do I do to make my person or my husband or my wife or anyone change? Where they probably never will.
Yeah, I really like a lot of Dr. Ramani's work on this and the way that she talks about it, and I think that, first of all, there's a scale, just like with everything else, and not to
Mm,
put people on a scale necessarily, but there are all of you know the the people that are kind of annoying, and they are actually narcissistic, and then there's the people that are physically, mentally, emotionally really
mm,
dangerous, and then there's everything in between. And
mm,
so, if we just look at that, first of all, to start, then wherever they are on that scale, they are going to, if they are willing to do the work, and they'll show up and do the work, and you can actually hold them accountable, because it's going to be one of the key factors, then they're going to be a little less bad. So wherever they are on the scale, they're going to be a little less bad if they're doing the work, and if you are able to hold them accountable and to help them
mm,
work through that. And it's probably going to take professional help from, whoever that is, in order to help them work through that, and perhaps professional help also to hold them accountable as well.
mm.
But the best that you can really hope for in a lot of cases, from what I see and what I understand, is they're
Yes.
going to be a little less bad from where they were starting out.
Mm,
And to touch on, uh, I don't believe that they are born. I believe that narcissists are, it's nurture, essentially.
yeah.
And, you know, s so, and I think that it's something that's developed in childhood,
Mm,
and then reinforced, and I don't know exactly how all of that comes about, but I know that there are some people that are really worried, oh my gosh, if I go through this thing, then I'm going to be narcissistic, or I went through this
mm.
experience and now I feel like I'm narcissistic. And I'm pretty doubtful that
Yes.
ever happens, especially as adults. So if you were not before, you probably are not now.
Yeah. And like you said as well, I think some of the important factors were the empathy, holding accountability. There's so many things. And if someone can do that, obviously it's the lesser. But then, like you said, most people
Mhm.
won't. They won't. They
Yeah.
won't hold themselves accountable. Or it's just not possible. So that's where it's a hard truth, I think. But you also have to think, what do you want for your life? What do
Yeah.
you want for your future?
Well, and
Mm.
especially if you have kids, what are you showing them that is the norm for? Because one of the reasons we get into these relationships is because what we grew up in was probably normal for us, but it may have not been healthy. So it didn't seem like it was that unhealthy when we got into whatever toxic relationship. And the other thing that I did want to touch on just a little is, just because they're not a narcissist does not mean at all whatsoever that they are any more willing to change anything in their life. And I know that that one is really, really hard for a lot of people, because it's like, well, they're not a narcissist, so they can change. And that's true, but I mean, the narcissist can change as well. But most people are really not willing to do much of any changing of much of anything in their lives.
Yeah.
And I realize that sounds incredibly judgmental, and it is just, it's just the experience that I've had. And the people that I talk to, probably the people that you talk to, these are all other people that are more willing and open to change. If you're listening to this podcast, watching any of the content, you're probably more willing to change.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot of
right.
other people are not.
That's a good way to put that too. So anyone listening know that, you are taking steps, even if you might not think you're taking steps towards uncovering what you need to work on or dealing with trauma or deep conditioning that you don't agree with. It's listening to a podcast is the way to start. And that's, for
Mhm.
me, it was audiobooks as well. Like you said, I started listening to audiobooks while I was driving
Mhm.
and started to do a bit more. And then it's more like you look on social media and you start following people that are doing that and you read books. I never really did any education. I've got a lot of lived experience,
Mhm.
I think, with my dad and doing my own research
Mhm.
into neuroscience and the brain. I love to research.
Mhm.
I don't like to read a lot as much, but
Mhm.
now I think it's really cool. Like online, you download an article, then they can read, like the computer can read it for you.
Mhm.
So like it's like reading out loud and then reading it. It's easy to take in. So I like to end the episode. I always like to end on asking a few questions. So the first one would be, what would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give them? If you could go back and whisper one piece of advice, what would you say?
I think it's okay for you to be kind to you.
Because it's not easy to be kind to ourselves
Yeah.
sometimes, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we find that we hold a higher expectation of ourselves or blame ourselves. Easy to shame and blame and guilt, but really we're always just doing the best at the time, aren't we?
Yeah. And I think, and I should say this for anybody listening. Um, I I thought when I turned 40, I thought that I finally really actually loved me.
Mm.
And I think now, I'm 43 now, and I think that actually more accurately, I finally didn't hate me. And so for anyone out there, and this is, coming up on 20 years of studying and working on myself. And so just a few years ago, I got to the point where I finally didn't hate me. And
Mm.
so that's really one of the major reasons that I say, it's okay to be kind to you, because I just wasn't. And so for anybody out there struggling with that, um, it is okay for you to be kind to you. And that's probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really wonderful. I think it was very vulnerable, and then we often find that we get to a point, especially, yourself being a coach, me doing the podcast and all this stuff, is you look back and you think of things that you wish you knew back then, but all we can do now is share it for other people, which
Yeah.
I think's really powerful to be able to do. Do you have any quotes or mantras that you like to live by?
Um, I think that, I say a lot that, that everything's okay. And so that's probably a major one. And I think, another part of that is to just always be kind to you. The compassion for yourself, forgiving yourself. And that's something we didn't talk about, but I don't believe that you need to forgive another person in your life at all whatsoever. It's really nice if you get there. But the one person that you do need to forgive is yourself.
Would you like to touch on that a little bit further?
Yeah, I think with a lot of the different belief systems and everything else, they talk about forgiveness, and we need to give all of the other people, and and I think that it's very, very hard for us to give someone else something, and even if we're doing it for ourselves, okay, we're going to forgive them for us, but if we have not forgiven ourselves first, it's very, very hard. And and it doesn't mean it doesn't this isn't the, victim shaming or anything, but we know that there are things that we have done that have contributed to where we've gotten in our life, and
Mm.
there's things that we didn't do or that we should have done, or all of that. And so there's a lot of forgiveness that goes into letting go of all of those things, which most of them are holding most of us back in our lives in some way. And so forgiving ourselves is a huge, huge piece of healing and moving forward. And then at some point, if you get to the point where you want to forgive someone else after you have forgiven yourself, I think that's wonderful, but I don't think it's a requirement at all whatsoever.
Just forgiving ourselves that's very important. I'm glad that we touched on that. And the kindness, being kind to yourself,
Mhm.
and knowing that most of us got to a certain point, and you're probably thinking like, I did this to myself. I made all these choices. It's my fault I am where I am. But a lot of the time we're just surviving, and we're coping and dealing with things. Like, our coping mechanisms are things that we've learnt to live with, just learnt to get through and survive.
Mhm.
We're all just humans. Like, we can be molded into a certain way that we don't agree with, and then it can obviously change, and we can change that. We can become different versions and better versions of ourselves. Do you have anything else you want to share today, Kyle? Been talking a lot.
I think most of it we've really touched on, and
Yes.
and I think just leaving everyone with being a little kinder to yourself, and
Perfect.
and allowing yourself compassion, and really give yourself a hug. And I know it sounds strange and weird, and society's going to think it's strange and weird, and that's okay. Um,
It's a really good one. I did a few years back. I did an online group session, and we hugged ourselves like this. And when you do it, if you do it really tight, you don't realize it. If for anyone listening that's not watching the video, I'm currently hugging myself. So give yourself a hug. That was really good. A great way to end. Thank you so much for your time today, Kyle. I really appreciate this, and I'm sure we've shared a lot of key takeaways. People can learn a lot of things from today's conversation.
Thank you so much for having me on.
That's okay. And to everybody else, I will see you next week. And remember, it's progress, not perfection.